Okay, chapter 15. By the way, I just put your chapter 13 quizzes that I finally graded this weekend, and they are in your folder. I got the verse test done for the other class. I haven't gotten your verse test done yet, but I will soon. I want to begin. I'm on page 103 of your Little Atheist book, but I'm going to begin with not just because it's C.S. Lewis, the C.S. Lewis quote at the beginning of the chapter. So I am on page 377 here to begin this. This is what C.S. Lewis wrote. There are only two kinds of people in the end. Those who say to God, "Thy will be done," and those to whom God says in the end, "Thy will be done." What does that mean? What does it mean?
Like, not accept God's way and then
Right. Right. I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but to give you a little window into my teenage angst. I would argue with my parents. I'm not saying this has ever happened to you, but if it has happened to you, you're gonna be like, uh-huh. And I would want to do something, or I would want something, and they would say no, and it was so unfair that they were saying no, and all my friends are doing it. By the way, do you know what my parents' answer always was when I said everybody was doing it? I don't care who's doing it, you're not. That was my parents' answer. So I've never actually said that to my children, I don't think so. But I have said because I said so, and trust me right now, you are going to say because I said so to your children. I know that you're like, I will never say that to them. But about the time your little 4-year-old is refusing to do something and they say, why? You're going to say, it's perfectly legitimate. I told you to do it. Do it. And it is perfectly legitimate. Anyway, that's off the beaten path a little bit. So I would be arguing with my parents about something that I wanted to do, and I would argue so badly that when then finally in frustration, they would say, "Okay, do it," and then I'd feel bad. I'd be like, "No, I'm sorry, I shouldn't do that. Whatever, I can do that." And so, yeah, that's kind of what's happening here, right? If we're going to refuse to yield our lives to God, He allows us to do that. The other quote from C.S. Lewis that we've read is that God can't compel us to love Him. He cannot ravish. He can only wound. And so, in the end, those who have submitted their lives to Christ, and who have said, "Thy will be done," who have come to know Him, because they've said "Thy will be done." But on the other hand are the people who have insisted on their own way and refused God, and God will say to them, "Thy will be done." You wanted it your way, and so now you have it your way. I sound like a McDonald's commercial. Okay, so you don't even remember that commercial. Anyway, after reading The Judge on pages 377 to 379, what does it mean to know that Jesus came into the world to take on the wrath of God for you? Oh, what's that supposed to be? Are you like, why is that? So what does it mean to know that Jesus came into the world to take on the wrath of God for you? Kind of tying in with that story of the Father and the Son. Yes.
That like even though like I still have to
Right. And an infinitely higher punishment, right? Infinitely higher payment than $5,000 for a judge probably Wasn't a lot of skin off their nose, but yeah, absolutely. For me, it highlights the Father's love because it's a completely undeserving gift. I don't deserve it in any way, shape, or form, and yet God lavishes. I love that word. Lavishes His love. He doesn't say, "Oh, okay." Jesus came willingly. He said, "Nobody takes my life from me. I lay it down." He came willingly, knowing what he would experience in the process. And not just on the cross. I mean, that's amazing enough and awful enough. But to be born into, coming from heaven, to be born into poverty, and to be shunned, even by his own family at times, and to be mistreated, and to be vilified, and to be arrested and tortured and crucified. All of it. He knew what he was getting into, and he still did it. Number 2, why did the creator of the universe humble himself by coming to serve, suffer, and die at the hands of the very creatures he created?
Because he loved us not the only way.
Yeah, out of his love for us. Look, you have heard that so many times that maybe it just, doesn't connect. But he desired to be with us. I mean, think of someone who, if they said, "Hey, I'd really like to come over to your house and spend some time with you," like somebody that you would be like, no, really? Okay, here's where I tell an embarrassing story. This is being recorded. So this is something, and actually I'm going to be on a panel of moms for a video at our church. And one of the questions it asks is, they're going to probably ask is, what's something that people around you don't know about you, unless only your family knows about you. And I'm about to tell you one of those things. It's really funny because when I was a teenager, like when I was in high school, nobody knew I was a Donny Osmond fan. Like nobody knew because it was so uncool to be a Donny Osmond fan. And of course, to me, the highest thing I could attain to is to be cool. And so I literally had my posters. I had a closet that opened out like this. On the inside of that door of my closet, and nobody knew, but everybody knew that I was a Debbie Boone fan. Now you don't know who Debbie Boone is. Ask your grandparents probably. But in 1977, the biggest, and at the time it was the biggest hit of all time, a song called "You Light Up My Life" came out. And I fell in love with that song. The movie was awful, but at least I got to hear the song like twice when I went to the movie. And I didn't know who sang it, but I loved the song so much that I began to get to know who that singer was. And she's Pat Boone's daughter. Probably don't know Pat Boone either, but he's a follower of Christ. And she was a follower of Christ. And she had this huge hit. I like to joke that I am the only person still in the entire universe that is not who is not sick of that song. Like it got played so much, people are like, "No, stop! I don't want to hear this song anymore." So Debbie Boone was coming to Omaha. She was actually coming to Exarban when there was an Exarban and giving a concert there. And this is where you learn what I learned from my mother, which was go ahead and ask. The worst they can say is no. So my mother, possibly on my father's 3-star general card thing, invited her. She was getting married later that summer to a wedding shower in her honor with all of the wives of the big guys in Exarban, like the counselors or whatever they were called of Exarban that were the part of the board. And so invited her to come to our home. And she said yes. Right? So here I am picking up Debbie Boone and her then fiance, and actually her younger sister too, at a hotel and bringing them home to my home and spending an afternoon with them. And then later when she came back to Omaha, her whole band came over to our house. And to me, as a 17-year-old, actually as an 18-year-old, I was the summer I graduated, and I've become a believer. And by the way, her testimony had a lot to do with my becoming a believer. And so I was just like in awe, like I can't believe Debbie Moon is in my house. I can't believe Debbie Moon is in my house. And why do we just think the King of the universe wants to be with us, not just for an afternoon, but for. And that seems common to us. It seems like normal to us. It should just like blow our mind. I mean, I'm still a Debbie Moon fan, not kind of crazy like I was when I was 18. But man, Jesus is so much more. Jesus is so much greater than anyone, any relationship. So he desires to be with us forever. Why else did Jesus humble himself and come to earth as a servant to give his life? Yeah.
He didn't want to force us to love him.
Yeah, he didn't want to force us to love him. It had to be a choice. But there's one other sort of purpose of his coming. Yeah, to pay for our sins and to have a relationship with us. But what had happened in the garden? Garden of Eden, not your garden. He walked with Adam and Eve, but then what eventually happened? They had communion with one another, right? And then what happened? Sin separated them. So Christ came in part to begin to undo the brokenness that sin has brought to the world. Now, has he done that completely? No, not yet. Will he? He will someday. So to begin to undo the brokenness of relationship that occurred in the garden. And not just, I mean, yes, the relationship between us and God, absolutely, primarily, but also the broken relationships that sin. Think about what our relationships would be like minus sin. Can you even imagine that? They'd be perfect, right? Every relationship would be perfect. We talk about healthy relationships in Senior Bible, and I show a video by a guy named Mark Gungor, and he says that pretty much every divorce happens for really only one reason. Either one or both of them get selfish. And the details differ from case to case. But sin mars our relationship. We get angry with one another. Oh, I didn't mean to have this stuff right now. Okay, we'll finish this up tomorrow.
Yeah, well, what do we do?
It's on fax.
There.